Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first receiver, Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. He went out there and he had one of the best fantasy games you'll see all season is Michael Wilson for this Arizona Cardinal team. A monster performance, operating as the number one wideout with Marvin Harrison out. So we'll see when Harrison comes back. But this obviously was a fluky game as well, where all season long he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. Before the Week 11 game, Week 9 at Dallas, 4 targets, 3 catches, 61 yards. Week 10 at Seattle, 4 catches, 34 yards. And Week 11 versus San Francisco, 15 catches, 185 yards, and a whopping 18 targets. So they were down early and often, multiple scores. Was this Arizona Cardinal team versus the 49ers in the Week 11 blowout loss. Week 12, a good matchup versus Jacksonville. 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. But Michael Wilson, like I said, I don't think he's ever going to do this again, the numbers he put up. And Harrison possibly could return this week versus Jacksonville. But after coming off a big game and surprisingly still out there in 53% of fantasy leagues, he's obviously on ad this week. The next day at Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. Alec Pierce, he went on bye with this Indianapolis Colts team, and it's been a good season for him. And if I had to pick between Alec Pierce or Wilson for the remainder of the season, I would go with Alec Pierce to have on my fantasy roster, where he's been more consistent. And this season, he's taken the next step with Daniel Jones as a big play wide receiver. So the last 3 out of 4 weeks, double-digit fantasy points, it's been for Pierce. Week 7, the Chargers, 5 catches, 98 yards. Week 8 versus Tennessee, 2 catches, 69 yards, 5 targets. Week 9 at the Steelers, 6 catches, 115 yards, 13 targets. And Week 10 versus the Falcons, 4 catches, 84 yards, a touchdown, 7 targets. He's making plays. I know he's more of a deep ball threat earlier in his career, but this season he's running the route tree, making plays yard after catch, and he's getting in better position and obviously better quarterback play. So with all those factors, I like what he's been doing this season. He's out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson, we know he's a big play receiver, but injuries have been a problem for him throughout his NFL career, and now he's been back for a month as Christian Watson, and his biggest game was Week 11 at the Giants, where he found the end zone twice in that ball game. Week 8 at Pittsburgh, 4 catches, 85 yards. Week 9 versus Carolina, 2 catches, 58 yards. Week 10 versus the Eagles, 2 catches, 45 yards. And Week 11 at the Giants, 4 catches, 46 yards, 2 touchdowns on 5 targets. So like I said, Christian Watson, he's got upside. We've seen it a few years ago where he had a breakout second half in his rookie season. But the thing is, he's got to stay healthy as Christian Watson. But anytime a guy comes off a 2-touchdown game and he's in a wide receiving room where it's banged up and there's not really a true number one option, he's definitely someone to add this week, and he's out there in 66% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Jaden Higgins of the Houston Texans. Higgins still out there in 84% of fantasy leagues. In the last couple weeks, he's starting to come on now with Higgins as a number 3 option in this passing game behind Nico Collins and behind Dalton Schultz. And honestly, I think this offense has been a little more productive with Davis Mills in their quarterback over the last 2 weeks than with CJ Stroud in there for pretty much the majority of the season. Week 10 versus Jacksonville, 5 catches, 42 yards, a touchdown, 7 targets. In Week 11 at the Titans, 4 catches, 55 yards, 7 targets. In Week 12, they're going to have to put points on the board. Buffalo Bills coming into town versus Houston Texan team, where their offense exploded with a monster game, 44 points, and it was 6 touchdowns in that one for Josh Allen. But like I said, Jaden Higgins, he's starting to get it going. Rookie season, we know second half of the year, mostly these rookies start to get going and more involved in the offense, and that's been the case right now with Jaden Higgins. So with all those factors, and there's not much going on besides Collins and Schultz in the passing game, he's out there in 84% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers. So Legette, he's been on the list a couple times this season. He'll have one big game and then he'll disappear for a few games, Xavier Legette. That's been the type of season for him. So Week 11, it was a big game for him. 4 catches, 83 yards, a touchdown, and 8 targets at the Atlanta Falcons, where their defense has just been a weird defense all season long. Legette's banged up as well right now with a hip injury in that ball game. So he's not really a high upside wide receiver with Tetor McMillan. If you want to own anyone in that receiving room, obviously he's the guy to own over there in Carolina. But like I said, he's coming off a good game, had 8 targets. He has some upside as Legette, but more weeks than not, he's not doing much. But he's available right now, 93% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Matt Collins of the New England Patriots. Matt Collins, he's been a good factor for this New England team. And this Patriot team on fire, winning 8 games in a row. And Matt Collins, he's been a deep ball threat anywhere he's gone. And the last 3 out of 4 weeks, he's had double-digit fantasy points. Week 8 versus Cleveland, 7 catches, 89 yards. Week 9 versus Atlanta, 2 catches, 9 yards. Week 10 in Tampa Bay, 6 catches, 106 yards, 10 targets. And Week 11 versus the Jets, 4 catches, 64 yards on 5 targets. So Week 12, a great matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals, a defense that can't stop anyone. Give up the 16th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. And like I said, Drake May, type of quarterback that spreads that football out everywhere, gets his receivers the football. And Matt Collins, like I said, the last month of the season, he's going out there and making an impact for this Patriot team. And he's out there 95% of fantasy week. Next receiver, John Mechie at the New York Jets. So with Garrett Wilson on IR, someone's got to catch the football over there in New York. And we know Mechie came over from the Philadelphia Eagles in the Michael Carter deal. A few years ago, he was a second-round pick from the Houston Texans. It didn't work out. And in his second game with the New York Jets, Week 11 in New England, it was a good game for him. 3 catches, 45 yards, and found the end zone. So with Garrett Wilson out at least 3 more weeks, Mechie, he's going to fill in to one of those receiver spots. Donnie Mitchell as well might fill in as well in one of the receiver spots where he was traded to the Jets in the Sauce Gardner deal. And like I said, someone's got to catch the football in this New York Jet team. They're most likely going to be trailing all these ball games the remainder of the season. So with those factors and Mechie having a good ball game in Week 11 in New England, he's an add this week. And the final receiver I would add is Terrell Shavers of the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills shaking things up a little bit in the receiving room. Keon Coleman, he was a healthy scratch in last week's ball game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. One reasons not showing up on time to practices and meetings where he didn't play in last week's game. And Shavers made the most of his opportunity. 4 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown on 5 targets. I know Gabe Davis was called up from the practice squad and also McCall Hardman. So a lot of moving pieces, and Buffalo was trying to find a way to get these guys going and shaking things up a little bit. And obviously they did score in 44 points, beating Tampa Bay in last week's game. But like I said, Terrell Shavers, he had a good ball game. The last couple weeks, he's starting to see more snaps and make plays for this Buffalo Bill team. But like I said, he's more of a deeper league yet, but coming off a big game, 4 catches, 90 yards and a touchdown, and playing with a quarterback like Josh Allen, who obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's definitely someone to keep an eye on. So that's a few wide receivers I look to add off the wire for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.